Alright, our news says here BlackRock insider reveals XRP Clarity Act bombshell. Now, imagine holding an asset that has won its battle in court, only to watch the ultimate legal finish line get pulled away at the absolute last second. Right now, a quiet storm is brewing behind closed doors in Washington. And it involves a massive legislative package known as the Clarity Act. While millions of retail market participants were looking at July 4 as the day crypto would permanently change in the United States, that critical deadline officially came and went with absolute silence from the Senate. But why did it miss the target? And what exactly happens when the Senate reconvenes on July 13? An analyst recently shared an incredible breakdown here on X, uncovering a web of BlackRock connections, secret banking blockades, and a brand new SEC agenda called Project Crypto. If you think XRP is just tracking regular market movements, you are missing the real institutional chess match. So let's dive straight into what is happening behind the scenes. So, why is a former BlackRock director warning about an Asian regulatory takeover? The analyst highlighted a fascinating clip featuring Joseph Chalom, the CEO of SharpLink and a former 20-year managing director of BlackRock who led strategic ecosystem partnerships. Shalom recently traveled through major financial hubs like South Korea and Hong Kong, and his takeaway is a massive wake-up call for the US lawmakers. He warned that if the Clarity Act continues to stall in Congress, Asian governments are fully prepared to pass their own comprehensive rules and completely leapfrog the United States. So here's my opinion. I look at Chalom's background and realize that people of his caliber do not make public warnings lightly. BlackRock understands global liquidity better than almost anyone. If the US fails to establish a permanent federal framework, capital will simply migrate to jurisdictions like Japan or South Korea, which are already moving at lightning speed. The US is playing a dangerous game of political foot dragging while the rest of the world builds the infrastructure to capture the digital asset market share. Now, is a secret banking lobby actively stalling the Clarity Act to protect their profits? According to the post shared by the analyst, the delay of the Clarity Act isn't just standard political gridlock. There is a fierce battle happening between traditional commercial banks and digital asset exchanges. The bill passed the House of Representatives with an overwhelmingly 294 to 134 bipartisan vote, or 294 to 134 bipartisan vote. And the Senate Banking Committee pushed it forward with a 15 to 9 vote on May 14. Alright? However, major traditional banks have been lobbying hard against the bill, and the question is why? Because the permanent legal framework established by the Clarity Act would allow fully compliant crypto platforms and alternative payment networks to safely siphon away massive amounts of business and market share from traditional banking systems. By keeping the rules muddy, banks protect their own monopoly on global payments. Now here's my opinion. It is the classic story of old money trying to slow down unavoidable innovation. Traditional financial institutions realize that if XRP and the broader digital asset economy get cemented into federal law, the high fee slow-moving rails they rely on become obsolete. They aren't trying to kill the bill because it's bad policy. They are trying to buy themselves time to build competitive products before they get completely run over by faster blockchain architecture. So, what is the SEC's Project Crypto and how does it reset token classification? The analyst also pointed to a public statement from current SEC Chair Paul Atkins regarding a major internal initiative dubbed Project Crypto. Atkins, who has spearheaded a much more pro-innovation and modernization-focused regime at the Commission, stated that the agency has finally delivered the foundational certainty that the crypto community has been begging for. Under this new initiative, issuers can actively verify and understand whether a token functions as a security before they launch or deploy it into the market. Now, here's my opinion. This is an absolute breath of fresh air compared to the historical regulation by enforcement approach that drag companies into multi-year court battles. While Project Crypto provides an incredible administrative framework today, we have to remember that agency interpretations can change whenever a new administration takes office. This is precisely why administrative clarity is a fantastic bridge, but it cannot completely replace statutory law passed by Congress. Now, here's the road to enactment. The legislative journey of the Clarity Act shows exactly how far crypto policy has traveled, but it also reveals the final hurdles standing in the way of complete regulatory certainty. This July 17, 2025, the Clarity Act passes the full House with an overwhelming bipartisan majority vote of 294 to 134. Back on May 14, 2026, the Senate Banking Committee advances the bill to the legislative calendar with 15 to 9 votes. And this July 4, the symbolic deadline for presidential signing passes without a vote as the Senate enters recess. And this coming July 13, 2026, the Senate officially returns to the floor, marking the start of a critical 4-week window before the next recess. And now, will the missed July 4 target cause a near-term shakeout for XRP holders? Now that the bill has missed its initial symbolic target date, the analyst noted that market participants are bracing for some choppy waters. Whales and major institutional allocators are reportedly preparing for a near-term price correction as the market fully digests the reality that a final vote could take several more weeks or months. To pass the Senate floor and beat a potential filibuster, the bill still needs to secure at least 60 total votes, requiring a minimum of 7 crossover votes from across the aisle. Now, here's my opinion. I completely agree that we are likely to see some short-term turbulence here. The crypto market loves trading on hype and tight deadlines. When a highly anticipated date like July 4 passes without a definitive resolution, impatient capital tends to rotate out, and the larger entities often use the temporary disappointment to shake out weak hands. But as a market observer, I view this potential volatility as a structural reaccumulation phase rather than a fundamental failure. And now, how should long-term market observers position ahead of the final floor vote? Right, despite the midsummer target, the long-term outlook presented in the analyst post remains heavily focused on structural growth. Crypto adoption is expanding globally through parallel movements across the US, Europe, and Asia. Okay? And that's completely independent of single legislative delays. The strategy shared by the analyst emphasizes dollar cost averaging through the near-term noise and treating short-term multi-month swings as completely irrelevant compared to the multi-year macro cycle. Now, here's my opinion. This is the exact mindset required to survive this space. Zoom out and look at the bigger picture. XRP already secured its primary retail legal clarity in court, and spot XRP ETFs are already quietly building up their assets under management. A legislative delay of a few weeks or months does not change the fact that institutional rails are actively being laid down. Trying to perfectly time a political vote is a fool's errand. Focusing on institutional accumulation is where the real value lies. And finally, here's our overall conclusion. The Clarity Act didn't cross the finish line by the 4th of July, but the underlying momentum pushing this legislation forward is entirely unbroken. The warnings from former BlackRock insiders remind us that global competition is fierce, and the US banking lobby is actively fighting a losing battle against inevitable technological disruption. When the Senate returns on July 13, the clock restarts on a vital 4-week legislative window. Expect the market to throw plenty of volatility and mixed headlines our way as politicians debate the 60-vote threshold. For long-term market observers, the play remains exactly the same. Ignore the emotional swings, monitor the institutional accumulation, and keep your focus locked entirely on the structural macro shift. And this finally ends our video. Thank you very much for watching, and see you on the next one, or you might just as well check this next recommended video right here.